Michael, thank you so much for being on Automating Success. I'm Joe Langton. This is Julia Langton. So Michael, pronounce your last name for me. I think it's very interesting and eloquent how you say your name.
Sure. My full name is Michael Trajan Todoran.
So hopefully the audience would realize why I didn't want to stumble with that. And I sometimes you just have to know when to step aside and let the professionals be the professionals, and saying your name is your thing. So anyways, so we want to welcome you on the show today. Super excited to have you. So Michael, I'll just get right into it. So you're an amazing guy, in my opinion, and I want my audience to know that. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I grew up being a graffiti artist in LA, and then I went around 19. Joined the Coast Guard, did 4 years in the Coast Guard. Got out, used a GI Bill to get a fine art degree. And then I was a practicing artist for about 10 years. And then from there, I wanted something a little bit more engaging. So I wanted to be an architect. But then I heard a landscape architect talk at a lecture and just fell in love with the profession right there. So then I decided to go to Ohio State and get my master's degree in landscape architecture. And then after I got my master's, I moved back. Well, I'd been moving around the country, but I made it like a hero's journey all the way back to Los Angeles. And then I've been practicing landscape architecture since 2012 here in Los Angeles.
That's pretty amazing. So the graffiti thing, that was interesting when I was listening to some of your podcasts, because you have a podcast that's a great podcast. And when you were explaining that, and you had to explain how to, you can maybe explain more, but in one of your projects, like fit the graffiti into, to show how eloquent it is and stuff. I just thought it was an amazing thing that most people wouldn't think about. But graffiti is actually, I always think like how amazing it actually is, the art that's in graffiti. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
So yeah, thanks, Rose. Well, you could have helped me out. You could have seen me stumbling and helped me earlier on. But
I just didn't know how to help in that situation. It was too far gone.
Yeah.
And I feel like she was secretly enjoying seeing you suffer.
I was a little bit.
Yeah, I do think there's a couple of moments like this that happen that she's like, yeah, there you go.
I think I understand what you're saying, and I think what you're trying to allude to is that in one of my lectures, I was able to articulate that there's principles in graffiti design that are based off of typography, and typography has like design elements that are followed through in any kind of design, right? Like proportions and legibility and expression and those types of elements can carry through if you stop to think about them and recognize them. And when I went to art school, my thesis was to create a font based off of the language of graffiti. And I had to learn how to draft by hand, using like a mechanical pencil and a T-square and a triangle, and French curve, and all of that. So I didn't know it at the time that eventually, I would be, a landscape architect and use those same principles. But it was definitely a precursor that helped me later on, both with aesthetics and proportion, and then of course the skill set of drafting, which I still draft a lot by hand as well.
Yeah. So it's just cool to kind of paint the journey there. So everybody that listens to our podcast knows that Julia and I, we have a beginning song to kind of explain our guest a little more. So explain your song, title, name, and what it means to you.
Sure. So the song And I like that you asked that question because I was thinking about it a lot. And of course, what I did was like, I knew it right away. And then for about a week, I kept entertaining different songs. And then I finally came back to my initial, what my gut reaction was. And it was Self-Care by Mac Miller. And the reason why I like it is I think people that are as busy as I am and as ambitious as I am, we tend to work really hard, and we could drain ourselves a lot, and we could, we end up taking care of a lot of people. We take care of our clients, we take care of our family, we take care of the consultants that we work with, the students that I teach. And it's like, well, we have every now and then we got to stop and take care of ourselves, and I have to remember that so I don't burn out. And I put that song. I could take some time off and go to the beach and lay in the sand, and get some sun and recharge, and then get back to the grind.
Yeah. Well, no. So, I mean, that statement in itself, gives me chills a little bit, because I think that's something that people like us, sometimes have to stop and smell the roses, as they say, because you get so caught up in being there and mentoring people. And I think personally, for me, what happens is when people see you as that person, unless, nobody's going to remind you for you, unless it's people that really care about you. Sometimes,
I was going to say, hang on a second.
She's not giving me enough chance, So she'll tell me, like, Dad, do you for a minute, relax, but
Well, hang on. I was ecstatic, though, when he said this song, because, so you probably don't even know who Mac Miller is.
I know who Mac Miller is.
You know who Mac Miller is? I'm really actually impressed by you. Yeah. But it interested me then, because in the thing we were listening to of his lecture, he said he was involved in a couple rap battles here.
Oh, do not ask me to rap.
I won't ask you to freestyle, but it did pique my interest, because I would have not expected it at all.
Well, why don't we talk about that a little more, Michael?
I was just being young and silly. But in the lecture, I was saying that at the time, I think this was 1993, and I thought that I would be a rapper, and but it was this was the age of Vanilla Ice, and it was not okay to be a white rapper at the time. And he kind of ruined it for everybody, just because it was he was great and all, but it was a little bit of a novelty, right? He wasn't really respected, right? And which is it is what it is. So it wasn't until I guess Eminem really came out and was okay, there's a place for us in this game. But I'm glad life events took me away from that.
Yeah. So we could transition out of that, because the next question really is to tell us about the young you, how you grew up, family background, kind of bring us a little bit into the younger Michael.
Sure, yeah. So, growing up in Los Angeles definitely affected or influenced how I saw the world, right? So, I guess when I was 14, we built our own house in West LA. We bought a house and we took it down completely to the ground, and I got to learn how to, all the way from pouring the foundation to finish work. We did absolutely everything. It was a family project, which was pretty unprecedented in the neighborhood that we did it in. It was a pretty affluent neighborhood where that just doesn't get done. It's usually everything's done by contractors and all that. So that was a really big influence. And I still I can still swing a hammer with both hands upside down, left hand, right hand, anyway. I never lost that skill set. And then, I don't know. I guess I'm drawing a blank a little bit.
Well, just I know I'm listening to some of your stuff. Didn't your parents come from Serbia? Right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like kind of that background.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Kind of
my mom is from Serbia. My dad's from Romania, and they're immigrants, and they came over here. I'm first generation American, and what shapes a lot of who I am too is that like my dad, he wasn't diagnosed, but I'm like, there's no way that he wasn't bipolar, right? And he was like really violent. And because of that, I have like PTSD, and I have to learn how to navigate the world with that. Like, how do I be an artist? How do I be a designer? And I've figured it out for the most part, which is really nice. And I'm okay with sharing that story, because I think as designers, as architects and landscape architects, we tend to really like shield our imperfections, right? Like from our clients and from the people that we work with, and always portray like this like magnificent facade of like who we are. And I wish I could do that as well. But like more importantly than creating that facade is sharing who I am and my experiences, then later on, of course, dealing with like sobriety because of the self-medication that I had to do with dealing with the PTSD. But by sharing that facade, or sharing the real me, what like makes me now, gives other people confidence. And I have people reach out and say, like, thank you for being vulnerable, because this is what I grew up with. This is what I'm dealing with. And I thought I was the only one. And I was considering not pursuing this career because I felt like an outcast. But if you could do it, then that means that I could do it, right? It's just certain things that I have to put in place to make sure that I'm okay. It might be a little bit different than other people. And that's fine. I just have to do it. Like one good example is, so I work in a co-working space, right? And a lot of people have their phones that when they get a text, it's like that ding, right? And to everybody else, it's completely fine. But for me, that high-pitched little ding noise is really hard to deal with, especially if it's 3 or 4 people and it's like happening all day long, because everybody's like entrepreneurs and freelancers around here, and it could just like stop me from working. So I have to be able to walk up to them and say, hey, like, this is kind of weird, but I have PTSD, and that loud pitch noise is really hard for me to deal with. Do you mind changing it to the bamboo setting? That's like a real natural like knock, like, and that's like totally fine for me to deal with. And so once I started owning like what I'm dealing with in my space, then I don't have to sit there insufferable trying to deal with all of that. And anyone that I've ever asked that from is like, oh yeah, no problem, totally cool. Like, I got you. Like, is this setting cool? Like, you can put on silent, They're like, no, you don't have to put on silent, but that's good enough for me. And it's those little things that you would never think of.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you shared that, because I mean, I think if people don't share their true selves, like I don't have PTSD, so I would never understand that unless someone like you shared that with me.
Yeah.
You know, you can hear about it on the news or read about it and stuff, but until somebody articulates it like you just did, how even the simplest ding can trigger something, people wouldn't understand. And you know, to go off of, I didn't want to interrupt you in your comments, but I think that, you know, there's a certain amount of like genuine, like, I mean, human beings, we're not perfect. Like, we're less than perfect. So for people to try to put on this facade of perfection, I believe it sometimes is off-putting, because most people know, like, that's what makes them want to pick underneath the layer to say, okay,
there's something there.
There's something here. Like, you can't be this perfect, you know? And I, you know, I think you and I and Julia, like, we share that, because, you know, sometimes I'll share so much personally and people will be like, man, why do you share this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Because I'm not ashamed of anything that happens. Everything that is our past is what's molding us in the present. So I'm never ashamed of any of it. It sounds like that's same thing with you, you know?
Yeah. Also, like, you know, they're like, I think people are starting to understand that whole machismo facade, like, especially like being a man, you know, like, what does that mean? And like, people are much more receptive to men being like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. If anything, I would say it's a very like courageous thing to do as well. It's almost less courageous to hide it and pretend it and then have to deal with it completely. But at the same time, you know, as a business owner and leading several different fronts, you also have to be stoic and know when to, you know, it's a balance, right? You can't just like you know, the pencil sharpener breaks and dive into like childhood traumas or something, you know what I mean? Like, you know.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I always tell Julia, because I don't want her to fall into my same pitfalls.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I feel like she already is I feel like as leaders, sometimes we become like stress capacitors for the people we work with, you know? So all these people around us see us as like their rock, right?
Yeah.
So then they come to work with all of these stressors that they have, and they'll like, you know, they'll share them. And I'm always someone that wants to hear those stresses. And this is what I'm saying. I feel like she does the same thing. And then some of the people closest to me know my stress capacitor is about 3 months worth. So I can deal with 3 months of everybody's like outside stress. And then all of a sudden I look insane because I'm like, I'm done with it. I can't, you know, this is this and this is that. And they're like, whoa, you know. So one of the things though, you know, that I can say is like, you know, it's difficult because I could be better. You know, it's like I could be better at not allowing it to turn into that capacitor type of take all that negative energy and store it and then explode it. You know, it would be almost better for me to share back and be like, you know, so, okay, let's talk about that, but let's stop talking about, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. You could also like when, I mean, like you could also bring like outside consultants in as well to like how to mitigate that, right? Like, so like if your employees feel like there's a space for them to healthily, I don't know how to say that word, but a healthy way of expressing their frustrations in their life. So that way it doesn't carry on into work and you have to carry that weight as well. Like a filter, maybe.
Have you ever watched the show Billions?
Which one?
Billions.
No.
It's on Showtime.
One of his favorites.
It's one of my favorite
I've
shows.
never watched it.
Okay, so it's awesome. But anyways, it's about a guy in the stock market. But anyways, he has a kind of like he calls them like stress coaches. Her name's Wendy Rhodes. And anyways, Bobby Axelrod owns X Capital. But everybody sometimes when I say I watch Billions, they're like, oh, you think you're Bobby Axelrod? And I go, no, I'm Wendy Rhodes. I deal with everybody's problems all the time,
Yeah.
So
he's not exaggerating. He does. It's something too that I've realized with the role that I'm in, that like I definitely vent my stress to you. But now, like in the position I am, I actually do realize, because now I think I get a lot of, the team that I work with, just everyone day to day, I listen to all their stressors, and then, I don't want to be like, all right, well, this is my stress and my stress and my stress. And then I come home and I let him know my stress. But it's kind of crazy to think too, I've never looked at it like from his view, but now I am in his role, so, like somewhat, a smaller version, but now I actually see what he means when it's like, okay, you take in everyone's stress to what extent though, but it's kind of crazy because I think people on the outside don't actually realize how much stress as a leader you can take in from other people until it kind of hits you and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot.
Yeah.
It's something that it's more relevant to me now. Like,
it is a lot. It is a lot.
So let's get back to you. So you said you went to school on a GI Bill. What got you? How'd you end up in the military?
Yeah, so I growing up in LA, when I was doing a lot of graffiti, it was like a pretty violent time in the 90s in LA, and right at a certain point, I was having problems with like these like graffiti crews that were like pretty much like gangs. And at one point, I was being chased down the street, and there was like a van full of guys with like, baseball bats, and I was able to like get away. But then that night, at home, I was like, I don't want to live like this. Like if I got caught, if I tripped, if I was one step slower, then, being beat up by like 10 guys with bats, I don't know, I'd probably be paralyzed right now, right? Like who could survive that? So from there I was like, okay, I need a way out. I had already tried college once. I went to community college, but I was just too young in the head. It only lasted like a couple months. And then, so I thought, well, I'll join the Coast Guard, which felt like, I loved the water, I love surfing, and it was just a good way to get out of LA and make money, and then get discipline, right? That was a really big thing that I felt like I needed as well, and it definitely, I feel like made me a man for sure, because now in the Coast Guard doing search and rescue, it's not about you anymore, right? It's about your team, it's about your crew. It's about the people that you're trying to save. And then I got to see really good leadership, but I also got to see really bad leadership as well in the military. So I was able to kind of really like get a good holistic experience of what it means to do things outside of your own interest.
Yeah, I think it's something to be said that the best leaders actually are the ones that are able to identify good and bad leaders.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no such thing. And I think every person needs a different style of leadership.
Yes.
So, someone that you see as a good leader, someone else may not see as great, So I think it's interesting you bring that up, because that's something that I feel like, my journey in my life, I've always identified the ones I want to model myself after, ones that I would not want to.
Yeah, and in your pre-questions, there was the questions is, what type of leader are you? And I hated that question because I was like, I had to really confront what type of leader I am, and I wasn't happy with what I came up with, right? So I was because I'm trying to be honest and I'm trying to grow and trying to learn. And I don't think I've ever been asked that question directly, like what type of leader are you? And I would say that I definitely have a lot to grow. I do think that there's things that I do really well, and there are things that I need a lot of improvement on. I think one of the things that I do really well is, by nature, I'm really passionate, right? It's anything that I do, I'm going to be all in. If I'm washing a car, I'm all in. If I'm, there's nothing that I do that I'm not all in. And so when I'm doing projects and working with people or my students or or consultants, like, they know they have to bring it because I'm bringing it, right? So I think like leading by example in that way is where I tend to excel at. And then I also think that that in some ways at times I could be really sensitive to what people's needs and wants are. And I'll be able to stop things and say, hey, like, is this really what you want? Is this what you want to be doing? Is this what you need? And what do you need more? But where I really lack is that I'm very decisive and I move fast, right? So I make a decision and I'm on it. And a lot of people aren't like that. And I get really impatient when people aren't as decisive as I am or need more time to process or need more research. And I can get really frustrated with that, right? And so I had to learn that people have different ways of thinking and moving about. And I'm getting better, but I still have a long way to go with that for sure.
Yeah, so I don't think you should feel unique in as far as having a long way to go with that as a leader, because I think that's, as you're describing it.
Well, I was even going to hop in and say, again, just learning right now, I think I've had conversations with you where I say, this is frustrating for me. Like, I do get impatient as well. Or why do people not understand this as fast as I do? Like, why is this taking so long? And he's had to explain to me, like, you know what? Not everyone is going to think the same way as you or I.
Yeah.
It's about, finding the processes that'll help them along and make them understand, because it's not always going to be like this. So I think that's something I've run across too, and something that I've tried to work on.
It took me a long time, and I mean literally a long time to realize that the way that I think isn't weird, and the way you think isn't weird, because I think growing up for the longest time I was actually made to think that, having like wandering thoughts, and in looking back on it now, I realize, like, when I was in school, I had wandering thoughts because the teacher was trying to explain something that I already got from A to B, and I was done with it. Like, I was there, and it was almost like, what are we doing? And then for the longest time with work, I found the same thing. And it's actually what's probably made it look like, and after I say this, I'll be looking forward to hearing you say if you agree. But I think sometimes as leaders, we get labeled like control freaks because people think that I want the control. And what ends up happening is, I don't know that it's so much being a control freak or impatient. It seems like I want the control because I end up just kind of like you said, I just make a quick decision because I want to allow people to make their own decisions, but sometimes it just takes too long.
Yeah.
So like what happens for me is, like, I'm waiting and I'm like already knowing where I want them to end up. And then it's like that like egg timer clicks in my head where I'm like, yeah, too much time now. Let's go. This is what I want you to do. And then it's like, wow, that guy wants all the control. And it's like, so it's something that even though I recognize it, this is what's insane about it. I recognize it, but I still can't control it.
Well, I think I could help you with that.
Okay.
And because this is something that I've had to deal with for a really long time. And I think once I say it, you'll probably be like, oh, yeah, that will work. So the way that I've dealt with it is compartmentalizing when you are a control freak and compartmentalizing when you want an expedited result, right? So let me give you an example for me. So there are some creative endeavors that I'm doing that are artistic in nature, and I own being a control freak, right? Like I want control of this and I don't deny it, right? And so you own that, and by owning that, you're saying like, this is the way that I want it, this is my vision, this is the way I see it, and I want to work with people that will help me make this happen, right? So in that case, I'm okay with that, right? However, if I'm working on a collaboration with the design and clients, and we're doing a front yard and a backyard and a huge project, then you let go of that control aspect and you get into the collaboration mode, right? And then you say, okay, like, how do we work together? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to make all of this happen. And by dividing and compartmentalizing it, it's like you're able to maximize like an efficiency to it, right? So if you're going to roll out a new plan, right, like for your automated system, and you see the vision and you know you want it like this, then I think it's okay to be a little bit on that control freak side, right? Until everyone can kind of catch up a little bit. But then when you're dealing with like the scheduling or, I don't know the ins and outs of your business, then you can relax that controlness and become more, I don't know if this is making any sense.
No, it does. So basically what you're telling me is, it's, in your opinion, it's okay to control the vision, just don't try to control how the vision's achieved, right? Is that kind of
that's one way, but also like in certain like projects, right? Like it could be like how do I say it? Like it could be so okay, so for me, like right now, I'm like doing a documentary, right? So we just finished filming a documentary, and everyone that was involved within the documentary, I make it very clear that I have the editor's cut, right? I get the final say in how it's cut, right? I have like complete artistic control in that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I try to be too accommodating to everybody, then it could water down the product, right? So I know when to say that. But then when we work in filming and collaborating and trying to pick the music, like you have to listen, you have to be receptive. But at a certain point, I guess what I'm saying, it's you like finding a harmony to knowing that you can implement a very strong vision. So I guess you did sum it up right. I had to process it in my head all and come back to the circle.
See, so I did it again. I went to the radio.
And then you're sitting there impatiently waiting for me to figure it out.
but let's talk. Wasn't I being so patient? So seeing like kind of what you're into now, and you're obviously a very artistic guy. What got you into landscape design and architecture?
Sure. Yeah. I was So as a fine artist, I was in Las Vegas, and I was doing really well as a fine artist. I was producing shows, curating art shows. You know, I would find a space. I would, organize 100 artists together. I would put on the show, collect the artwork, hang the show, light the show, paint the walls, sell the artwork, get a commission, get a piece of that, give it to the artists, and then also showing my own work. And it's really heavily involved in the art world. And like the end game as an artist is to like have solo shows and be recognized and make a lot of money selling your art and like doing what you want to do, right? And I thought that that's what I wanted, right? Like I wanted to be that type of gallery artist. And then once I saw that this was about to come to fruition, like I had a lot of attention on me, I was getting solo shows, I was selling work well. I looked at that trajectory of what my life would look like, and I realized that it's not really what I want, right? So I worked at something for 10 years, like really hard, and right when I was about to, I guess, break out, right? I thought, this is not what I want, and I think it takes a tremendous amount of discipline and courage to know when to back off of something, right? And I thought to myself, I want something that's more than just about me and my work and my self-expression. And the natural connection was to become an architect, right? Like artists kind of fit really well in architecture, and it kind of goes in with whatever history. So some of the most impactful moments in my life as an artist was listening to artists do their artist lecture where they talk about their work and their experiences. So I thought, well, if I want to be an architect, I'll start going to the School of Architecture and listening to their lectures, right? Just so I could really see what they're about, what that lifestyle was. And I went to like 3 or 4 lectures, and I was like pretty interested. I was like, this is cool. And then a landscape architect spoke, and I was like, oh, nope, this is it. This is what I want to do. I didn't even know that it existed. Like most people don't even know that landscape architects is a thing. And then once I discovered that, I just never looked back, and I had to study for my my GRE and start applying to schools, and never looked back after that lecture.
So what was it in the lecture that really piqued your interest? Is there a point that for you it was like boom right now?
Yeah, what it was they had it was a like a planned community in China, and what they did was they used the natural grade of the mountainous area, and like they dug into the mountain and built the houses within the mountain, and all of the landscape was on top of the houses, and it almost looked like there was no houses there at all. And I just love the idea that you could create these spaces of nature and you could still live in it. And then, of course, by cutting the homes into the mountain, you reduce heating costs and cooling costs, and they were like more passive, and like the psychological benefits of being in nature, right? Instead of like a whole calcification of concrete within a community, right? Like it was a different approach to how to think about space in the outdoor environment. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I want to know more about that. And then,
we we definitely have to collaborate with Green Magic.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I was trying to tell that story. I didn't realize that's what got you into landscape architecture. And I'm sitting over here thinking like, oh my gosh, Green Magic Homes. Like this solidifies our need for partnering.
What's funny about that is that I didn't even make that connection until you brought it up right now, and that I haven't been able to really implement that thing that I first was attracted to. And maybe it does take 8 to 10 years to actually like
come full circle.
Come full circle. But,
yeah.
I've done it. I've done a lot of green roofs, lots of like green roof construction details, but nothing fully immersive like what you're doing.
Yeah. No. And like I said, I mean, your take is landscape architect on these is what they would, the vision they would need. You know, I look at what people have done with them so far. We won't stray too far on this, by the way. We'll come back to the main thing. But you know, when you look at it, people are like, "Oh yeah, it's a grass covered house or whatever." But really, it should be a landscaped covering. You know, that has its own personality, changes with the seasons. And what I want to get to when we build these structures for people, and actually hopefully have them talk to someone like you, where we say to them, you know, tell us about your personality, you know, and literally make the home they live in reflect their personality. Because I actually believe it can be achieved when you build a structure like that.
Oh, I do it every day. I just, right before I came here, right before I came here, I met with some clients, and most of my job is like psychoanalyzing them and just really like trying to understand who they are, how they think. You know, the client was like a real big sports guy. The wife was like a super sweet homemaker, and you know, they like, you just have to like pull out all of these things and then design for them. And then this would be an example of how I relinquish control, right?
Yeah.
I can't just go in and be like, this is what you guys need. I'm the artist, I'm the designer, I'm the visionary. Like, that's over. Those days are over. Like, those people don't really have a place, you know, as far as like designing for clients, right? But then when it comes to my construction details, that's when then you could bring control back in. So it's like a push and pull of where you have control and where you don't, because you don't want your construction details to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where you are able to embrace, you know, like wanting things a certain way.
Yeah, listen, I can't tell you how many times as a landscape contractor builder that there's a landscape, especially commercially, that's designed by a landscape architect, and then we get out there as a landscaper, and I look at the spec or the detail, and I'm like, hey, we don't even have this type of soil in Illinois, or your detail, it's not, doesn't make sense. Like, oh yeah, that's a project I did in Washington State, you know, just whatever you want to do locally. And it's like, what the heck is going on here right now? But, you know, all these landscapers are bidding a job to a spec, and then you come to find out the spec is not even to a local spec. And then I'm sitting here thinking like, what is happening to that industry?
Yeah.
I think it's actually really interesting what you just brought up.
Yeah.
Is, you know, there is a reason and a need to keep for a landscape architect to make sure they have control of that portion.
Yeah.
Because people like myself are bidding off that spec and scope.
Yeah. Well, what I do is I think this is what separates me from a lot of other designers, is I like to bring in the contractors really early on. You know, and like I love to know if I know which contractor is going to be building it. I walk them through the site. Hey, come take a look. This is what I'm thinking. You tell me. And they look at you and they go, bro, we can't. Are you crazy? I that's not the way it's done. I'm going, okay, tell me, my ego is out of this, tell me what you think. And they're like, well, what if we build this steel frame and then, clad it in wood and like do it this way instead of these hinges, okay, oh yeah, okay. You think about it, and, and the projects get done so much better when you bring the contractors in early.
Yeah,
they're happy, you're happy. You open up a line of communication. Client's happy. Nobody likes surprises. Client's not going to be happy at the last second if all of a sudden they're like, what do you mean we can't build this? And why is it going to cost me $8,000 more?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And even when it comes to the plant side of it, the contractors are the ones that warranty the plants. The architects don't, the wholesalers that grow it don't. And I can't tell you how many times I've walked a site and, I'll see, so a balled and burlap plant. So in Illinois, we have a high clay soil, and we have to crown the plant up. Otherwise you get the clay bowl effect and the roots rot. And so, you leave that little bit of a crown. But then I've had specs where they want you to take the steel basket off the plant. But I, as a contractor, want that basket to stay because I'm tree staking that plant and it's already crowned, a third out of the soil. I don't want that ripped all the rock. So I've had some architects and people running a site that'll take that feedback and go, oh, Joe, that makes sense. I've had other ones that are like, it's in the spec, pull it. And then I can't tell you how many trees are getting warranted. We have to realize, this, but a lot of my listeners wouldn't know, but roots have root hair. And if it rocks and keeps rocking in that soil, it rips the root hairs off the plant, can't absorb moisture anymore, dies, You try to explain that logically sometimes and people don't want to hear it. Yeah. So you talking, it makes me want to fly out to Illinois all the time, every time I'm going to do a job and let you speak on behalf of landscape architects,
You could pre-record a message from
we can start doing that,
Yeah.
So,
and then just to backtrack just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
At the same time, I will bring in contractors and I'll listen to what they have to say. But a lot of the times contractors will also might not have the complete design vision.
Yeah.
And try to lower the materials and do all that stuff. So at the same time, I also have to know when to push back as well. Say, okay, I hear you that we could, instead of a steel header, we could use bender board. But because I want this decomposed granite to over 20 years maintain a perfect line, and I want it separated, I'm going to stick by my guns and I'm going to say, I want this heavier gauge steel header. I want it to go a certain far down. And then on their part, that's when the contractor should also be like, okay, now that you explain it that way, I understand. And I know it'll, what I don't want to happen is myself and the contractor not having a good communication. I leave the job site, and then this happens all the time. And the client kind of says, "Hey," to the client, if we just replace this with a bender board, this is how much money you're going to save. And they go, "Oh," and they go, "Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry about that. Let's keep on. I got it." And then they put it in, and I come back to the next site visit, and I'm like, "Oh, you guys shouldn't have done that."
Yeah. So you know what I think happens? We could actually have a whole other hour-long podcast just talking about this. And actually, maybe we'll have to do that one day. You know what ends up happening is some of these GCs or these sites that where the ownership is always there, it's them just pitting us against each other. I have a job we just did that, the architect wants it kept all one way, but the owners are all trying to save some money. they're asking you questions and they just keep pushing and pushing. And you're like, listen, the site's designed, it's already been this way, you know? And it's like, well, yeah, but I never wanted to pay this much in the first place, you know? And it's like, I agree. It's actually easier for me as a contractor, because when you look at it from this perspective, and hopefully contractors that don't look at it from this perspective do, if they're marking up their products the right way, and if you as an architect have a vision that's supposed to last 30 years, if that price, if we're talking $1,000 piece versus $100 piece, you're going to make more money on the $1,000 piece if you mark it up properly. So I do think that the issue there is, if you have that problem on the contractor side, you have a contractor that just doesn't understand numbers, vision, and longevity. On the other side, I think contractors get blamed for things that owners just want to cut costs. They want you guys to come up with this great design, and then 10 years later, when it looks like shit, they complain to you and say, your vision was shit,
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough, but
that's the world we live in. It's a cutthroat industry,
Yeah, like my job is to say, okay, like why don't we just, for the majority of these plants, let's plant them in as 1 gallons, and let's wait. But for your entrance specimen, let's go ahead and spend the money on a 36 or a 48-inch box. And then that's where all our money goes. And then we wait for the rest of the landscape to come in.
Yeah.
So it's like, where's that push and pull? Where do we put our money? And if the client, the contractor, designer all work together, it's amazing what we could do.
Yeah. No, I agree. Totally. Well, and the smaller plants live better too. You put these large plants in, and the mortality rate is 3 times higher,
Yeah. Well, here in LA, when you're dealing with like Beverly Hills and stuff like that, oh my God. When I hear that expression that people say, I want it, what do they say? They say, there's a term for it, matured from day one or something like that. Like they just want the day they cut the ribbon, or not the ribbon, but the day they let everyone into their site, like at a hotel or something, they want everything fully grown in. And just like, you don't have to do it that way. Like people are okay with it. Everything's not fully grown. Yeah.
Well, I usually try to tell people, like, if you're worried you're going to die next year, this is a residential thing.
Yeah.
Let's get it completely matured right now. But if you plan on being around for another decade, let's not worry about it, And it usually calms them down.
Yeah.
Understand, like, enjoy the ride, enjoy the growth, watch the plant grow.
Patience.
Yeah, have some, because what I always tell people is, if I give you the biggest you can get now, your next 2 to 3 years you spend just keeping it from dying.
Yeah.
Put something in that's an easy transplant right now, then you spend a few years enjoying watching it grow.
Yeah.
But but that's a whole nother, like I said, it's a whole nother. So I want to hear more about what got you into having your own podcast. I mean, so it's like, you're an interesting man, because you have, you've got these passions that you have a passion for photography. Now you do a podcast. I know for myself, one of the reasons I got into the podcast is, I think this is like an education for my 20-year-old daughter to be able to be on hour-long episodes with someone like yourself. But explain to us kind of these other things you do, your other passions.
Well, I'll tell you why I started the podcast, but then I'll tell you why I keep going. And there are 2 different answers. So I started the podcast. Well, one, it's the old story where you wanted something to exist. It didn't exist, so you just created it yourself, right? So when I was in graduate school, and I was a recent grad, I thought to myself, like, where's the landscape architecture podcast, right? So I Googled it. I couldn't find it. It's like I do anything else. Fuck it, I'll do it, right? You know what I mean? I had no idea what I was doing. This was in 2015. which in podcast years is like a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot less resources, a lot less like support. And so I was just going around interviewing people with my iPhone, not preparing questions, just like, so let's talk, you know? And it was horrible, right? And then I learned along the way, like, okay, you have to prepare, you have to be organized, and so what I got out of it initially was just kind of meeting really interesting people and taking a understanding the human side of the designers, right? Because it's one-on-one, it's long form. But then what it morphed into was I have this amazing network. I mean, the people that I do business with, the opportunities that I've gotten, so much of it come from the podcast. I've got tremendous amount of work. I've got clients. I've got the opportunity to give a lecture at Cal Poly. Then that Cal Poly lecture turned into a teaching gig. You know, like some of the like leaders in our industry, because we formed this relationship from doing the podcast, and like they'll be flying into LA. They'll say, you know, hey, I'll be in town. Do you want to grab breakfast? Sure. You know, and so like this network, you know, I got to fly out to Florida. I got to fly out to Austin. I got to fly out to Philadelphia to go interview people. And that's fun, right? And then the next thing is, of course, I monetized it, right? That was like very important to me. If I'm going to do this, I want to make money doing it. And I figured out how to do that, which is tricky because it's a niche industry. And so it brings in money. It makes a profit. And that way it's sustainable. And then the next thing is why I keep doing it is that the feedback that I get from people of like how much it's impacted them hearing the stories and them becoming landscape architects because of the podcast and what they've learned, what they share. So it's so dynamic and multifaceted that it keeps me excited all of the time. And like right now, like I don't, if it wasn't for you having a podcast and me having a podcast, like I don't know, like because right now, like our last meeting, we were talking about maybe a business opportunity of us working together.
Yep.
Like, I don't know how that would have came across if it wasn't for these two platforms.
No, it would not have.
And then taking these deep dives and kind of feeling each other out. Like, yeah, we groove really well. Like, you know, we kind of have same ideas, and like we can, like our chemistry is good. And I don't know if that would have happened with the form over the internet, where I filled out 7 questions, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, so it's that these like deeper modern connections.
Yeah, no, I think that you brought up something that, you know, when people reach out on, you know, and give feedback on your podcast, but then we'll reach out on the website and tell you like how inspired they are by the things that we say. That's just things that we do every day. It makes you, it makes, I'm speaking for myself, makes me feel so invigorated, I guess, that, you know, certain things that we're doing are uplifting to people. I mean, I've got a really close friend of mine that's gone through some stuff, and he's a great businessman. And I won't say his name, but he'll know I'm talking about him when he listens to it. And just to hear how much he enjoys the podcast and listens to it, it's like, it does. It feels really good that you're helping people do something that, you know, comes to people like us, going back to, you know, what people kind of made fun of me for when I was younger. When I was younger and I was a union electrician, people would be like, Joe, you should get out of the electrical work and just get a radio show because all you like to do is talk, And they would always throw a little jab in there too. I was ugly too, so I can't do TV, But anyways.
You look great.
Oh, thanks.
You're a good-looking guy.
thanks, Mike. So, but anyways, but the thing is, looking back now, I get to do something that I actually thoroughly enjoy, and people actually tune in to listen to it. It's pretty amazing, But,
one thing
but a lot of people can't do it. A lot of people wouldn't want to sit in front of this now in today's technology computer on a Zoom call, but wouldn't want to do that,
Yeah.
So.
One thing that's scary is that like our numbers are really good. We have like a lot of downloads now. And I just yesterday looked at how many people downloaded my episode, the one that I'm very vulnerable in. And I was like, I don't want too many people hearing that story, So I try not to think about the like how many people are listening to it.
Well, let me tell you, I was one of those downloads, and your episode is an amazing. It's one hell of an episode. So people that are watching this, you're going to be mad when I say it then, because you should download and listen to it because it's pretty amazing. So obviously, I feel like we've kind of heard how you kind of made your way to where you are now. Or maybe you could elaborate if we're missing anything that gets you to where you are now. But then, what are some lessons you've maybe learned that have gotten you here, whether it be from an old boss or a mentor, because every one of us has had a job at some point, right? Like, so, I know you're in the military and stuff, but, kind of give us some background on that kind of molded you to be the guy sitting in front of us here today.
Yeah, I think
whether it be a job or military, anything.
Yeah, sure. Here's a really good story. I love this story. And every good leader that I know has this quality, and I strive my best to implement this strategy as well. Okay, so I was in the Coast Guard, and when you're on a boat and you're underway in the middle of the ocean, if there's a fire on the boat, you're your own fire team, right? Because there's nobody else out there.
Yeah.
If you don't fight the fire, you're going to die, or you have to jump off the ship and be rescued. There's no way around it, right? So what they do is they train you to fight the fires, and it's pretty intense, right? And we would have these drills where, they'd sound the alarm. They'd say, "Fire, fire, fire, fire in the galley," and then the alarm goes off. You dress out in your fire suit, put your oxygen mask on, you put your oxygen, tank on your chest, and you pull it to activate. You simulate everything like it's a real fire. And what they do is in order to make sure that you're doing it well, is they make it like a game, and you have like different teams that compete each other. And if you want men or people to excel, you make it a competition, right? Because that's what people like, right? So you do this, like, we have these games on how to do it, and everyone takes it really seriously, right? Everybody wants to win, and everybody also realizes the consequences for not understanding how to fight a fire on a ship. Okay, so now that I've set the stage, I'll tell you where the good leadership came from. So my friend sprained his ankle, and his position on the fire team was to be the number 2 hostman, which means that if there's a fire, this was an all-male ship at the time. The first hostman is the guy holding the hose, and the number 2 hostman is behind the guy with his forearm against his back, and he's his eyes, right? You're protecting him. He's just fighting the fire. You're doing everything else. You're steering him. You're making sure nothing's falling, right? So it's almost as if the number 2 hosman is the responsibilities are higher than the guy holding the hose itself. So my friends, people, we were going to do these drills, and they said, hey, they call me Toto because it's short for Todoran. They said, hey, Toto, we need you to be number 2 hosman. And I was like, sure, I don't know how to do it. You just give me a quick briefing. I'll do it, right? So I jump in, and like the team that I was on was like this crack team, and they always won. And they did everything well, and they were trying to win this event too, right? To fight the fire. And so I jump in, we do the whole competition, do a fake fire, we light the hoses, do everything, we're packing all up, and the whole team expected us to win. And then at the last second, the inspector came by and said, you, pointed at me, and he said, you didn't pull your oxygen tab, right? And I was like, shit. And so they go, okay, your whole team lost because of you, this team won, right? And everybody was upset at me, right? And not upset at me. They understand, like, I made a mistake and I was doing the job, but they were upset that they lost. And I was upset because I don't like failing and really competitive. I was super bummed. I knew I should have pulled it, right? I just forgot in the heat of the game. So after we put all the hoses away and we wrapped everything up, I went up to the chief on the boat, and I said, hey, chief, I'm sorry I made you guys lose the team. You know what I mean? I accept full responsibility, and this is my bad, And he didn't say anything. I was like, okay. And then a week later, they posted up the new teams, right? And then they put me as number 2 hosman, right? And I was like, why did they put me as number 2 hosman? I made a mistake. I made everybody lose. I went back to the chief. I said, chief, why'd you put me as number 2 hosman? He looks at me and he goes, because you came up to me and you understood what your role was, where you failed, and you wanted to make it better. And I know you're not going to make the same mistake again, right? And the lesson that I learned from it was when somebody makes a mistake, that's not the opportunity to fire them and punish them and to then put somebody else in. That's the most perfect time to give them more responsibility. And every time I've done that as a facilitator or as a professor, anytime that I've done that, it's like people they puff their chest up a little bit, they feel a little bit more proud, they got some responsibility, and they own it, and they walk into it, and the next time that you have them present or that you show their work, they're on it, you empower them, right? And any time I've been under good leadership, I always see that quality. And when I'm under bad leadership, I see them and say, oh, you messed up, you're out. And now that person's defeated, and I'm not going to see you ruin them, but you've definitely not gave them the space to grow.
That's good. Down hit. I'll think about that, actually.
Well, yeah, it's a coachable moment. So that's what it was. I feel like you recognized the fact that you were coachable and open-minded to your failure. And that's the thing that I take from that too, is that coachable people make it very far in life. Yeah. They can look at what other people are doing, their successes and failures, and build on them.
And now coachable is a huge word for me because one, yes, I was coachable and I was receptive to it. And now that I have an 8-year-old son, we talk a lot about being coachable, right? And he knows when I say, are you coachable right now? And sometimes he'll say no. And I say, okay, we'll come back and revisit this, right? But I will say that in that scenario, if I wasn't coachable, but the leader still came and just pushed upon me more responsibility, those people most of the time fall into a coachable position, right? So I had this student, so I'm like, I can be a really tough professor, and like I'll have a student, like right now I'm teaching over Zoom, and like they'll be yawning, they won't be prepared, and like all kinds of stuff. And I say, okay, I see you slacking. I say, you, XYZ person, tomorrow or the next class, you are leading and you are going to be presenting and you're going to show your work. And now you just like put this responsibility on them. And then if they weren't coachable, they have to step up. I guess my thing is like making people step up is healthy and good and much more rewarding for everybody than punishing. And then, and then at that point, if they don't step up, which barely happens, but when it does, then maybe they just weren't right for the job, and either you shift them over to something else or
Yeah. Well, and I think what happens is like, so I think some people, I think what you do too in that scenario is you identify the people that when you put that harder or like kind of you're in the light scenario, like you're going to do this, you're going to be looked at. They're either going to respond well to it or they're not. But at least as leaders, we know, okay, this person works better over here in this case than in front of it. Like, so I look at myself. So I look at myself and my sister, Vicky. Okay. My sister, Vicky, is a super smart woman. She runs a trauma unit for Loyola. She was always dedicated, would do her homework, and she could learn from homework. If you gave me homework in high school, I was like, what the fuck? All I was trying to figure out was who I was going to convince to do my homework for me. Like, that's the way it was, But there's a few teachers that I had that realized that, and they used to put me in front of the class all the time. But those are the classes I would get A's on the test because they pushed me to do something in front of the class. So when I was pushed to perform in front of people, failure was never an option for me. I had to figure it out. So anyways, as I'm hearing you talk about that story, there was no way you were going to fail in front of that team of people and let them fail again. Some people respond well to that pressure. Other people would they'd be crippled by that.
And obviously you have to use a lot of discretion, right? Like, you don't want to put somebody fragile that he's like deliberately sabotage them to crush them. But what you can do is like give them maybe not a public sense of responsibility, but just be like, okay, well, now you're in charge of this inventory, right? Or, I want you to make sure that this is done, right? And then it helps them relate to you on a better level because they're like, oh, wow, I see that you're responsible for 57 items and you're handling it. And I'm just now responsible for one and I'm frustrated. I can only imagine what it must be like running a whole entire business, payroll, scheduling, like client, like outreach, all of that stuff. So
yeah. So, Jules, you want to ask him about any health tips or? So I'm saying this because our podcast producer, when he posts all these things about Julia, it's always about getting the greens and the gains.
You got to eat the greens to get the gains. You do.
So,
all right, well, fine. What are your health and fitness tips? Because, well, I'm guessing they're going to be very different from yours. I'm hoping there's nothing to do with a deck of cards.
But just to young entrepreneurs or people that are in the business to be able to have some of their own time to get away and just focus on themselves, kind of like your song. So
kind of like what?
Kind of like your beginning
self-care.
song.
Oh yeah. I love that question. So it's tough because like right now, like at this very moment where I'm at, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been really bad about taking care of myself, about exercising or eating right, and it's really affecting me now, right? Because I've been so busy, I have so many things going. Like sometimes people can't even comprehend the amount of different projects that I got going, and they just like, and I've like let myself go. So I'm gonna speak more on when I am taking care of myself and what I'm gonna what I'm gonna be striving for to how to get back into it, right? So when I am taking care of myself well, I found that yoga is really good for me, especially with somebody that has PTSD. You know, I'm 45 now, and I'm 2 of my friends at the same age have hernias. One of my friends, passed a kidney stone. So I'm like, well, okay, I'm kind of at that age where, like you can have a heart attack, right? Like, I'm not 22 anymore. So like flexibility is going to be really key. My biggest fear in life is to be hunched over. Like I don't know if it's an irrational fear, but that's my biggest fear. Like I want to stand up tall and confident, and I don't want the work to like wear me down. So I think that's where like yoga comes in. It also helps me slow down my mind and be ultra focused, right? So when I do yoga, like when I've done it for like a month straight, like your intuition is so sharp because you're able to quiet that mind, and throughout the workday, different things come in. You're able to make a nice, rash decision because you're focused and you're balanced. That's a big one for me. And then swimming is my next one. Like I live right now. I'm moving to Utah, but right now I live in Los Angeles, and I go out in the ocean past the breakers with like 20 people, and we swim in the in the middle of the ocean for about a mile or 2 miles, and you're away from the world. There's no phones, there's no electronics, nobody can reach you. I used to put my Apple Watch on so I could see how far I've gotten and stuff, but now I just leave that, so I can't even get text, or I can't even look and see how far I've gone. I'm completely separated from the whole entire world for about an hour and a half. Like the whole world can just whatever. There could be a nuclear attack and I wouldn't know. And like that's pretty amazing, because when can you do that?
Yeah, that's crazy. You got some balls, man. I don't know that I'd want to swim a mile out in the ocean past the breakers.
No, that seems terrible.
I see those videos on YouTube when whales are coming up for air.
Yeah,
yeah, you feel real small, real fast.
Well, sorry, we swim parallel to the shore, so we're not a mile out. We swim a mile parallel.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that's insanity right there. So,
but we are pretty far out, and you do kind of sometimes freak out. And I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and even now, sometimes I freak out a little bit. It's what we do is like they kind of teach you to like stop, lay on your back, take a couple breaths, and then.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that one, but it's too cold to swim here. So I think that this weekend, a yoga session is.
Didn't you challenge me to yoga the last time when I was on your podcast?
And now it's been brought up twice.
I was kind of hoping it was going to get forgotten about.
Yeah, well, it's here. And I think, Dad, this weekend we are going to.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you what, my man. I think, like, I hate when people like proselytize, or what's that word, when they like thump an ideology on somebody. I just like despise that. But even though I despise it, I'm still going to do it right now. And I will say that, like, it's a game changer, and it's something that you could take. You could take until you're 80, And like the beauty of it is like you played football, you were an athlete, right? If you look at it in the way of all that you're doing is you're just doing a really good focus stretch session, being mindful of your breath. And if you look at it that way, like you're stretching, preparing for the day, for the world, and you're not like, oh, yoga, right? Like if you're worried that like in a couple of weeks you'll be carrying that yoga thing, have your water bottle with you, and like you'll be wearing tights and stuff. It's not like that.
Well, let me tell you what.
I don't think you'd ever make it that far.
But I, it's funny because looking back to football, the part of football I hated the most was the stretching. I'll do the push-ups, the sit-ups, the running. Oh my God, the stretching. But maybe it's because I was looking at it from the wrong way. To me, the stretching part was what I had to do before I could start hitting people part.
Oh, yeah. So, well, maybe we should do like combat yoga or something like that.
Does that exist?
Let's make it. It's like you stretch and then you like tackle the instructor.
That's going to beat the shit out of, I guess, when you're done. I guess that's a whole other thing. I got some issues if I got to beat the shit out of something after yoga. But the way that I've heard it explained really well is because some of the MMA fighters and football players, like the manliest of men are doing it now, and what they're saying is like. It's a fight against yourself, right? To hold a position like you'll see what I'm talking about. Once you get into it, you're like, holy crap, this is not good. This is really hard. And then how you feel after like a couple of weeks or a couple of months of doing it is okay, now I'm going to have to go do it. I will say I've never seen somebody that does yoga that looks bad typically. So maybe I should start looking into doing it, So our round out question is, what do you want to be most known for as a person? What's your legacy? What do you want to leave, in people's minds for you?
And that's a really hard one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Listen, if somebody asked me this question, I think this is an evolving question, right? So I think you've got to tackle this question as of right now. Not try to figure it out by what you're going to want when you're 60 or 70, just right now.
Yeah. I suppose I suppose right now I'd like to be known for the contributions that I've made within my field and within like what I've offered creatively. So I, like that would be important to me, but that's so small in the big scheme of things that I guess that's tough, You talk about legacy, I guess just being a good person, it boils down to it, right?
Yeah.
He's a good God. And I don't know if that's a legacy either. I think it's something I probably have to keep working towards.
Yeah, so here's the thing, man. I think that it's kind of like, I always tell her that if you live your life based on You know, I know she'll hate that I always bring it up. How many people are going to attend your funeral?
Yeah.
You're living it right, you know, and I think that what you want to be remembered by it evolves with you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no right or wrong answer to this, you know, it's kind of one of those get you out of your comfort zone type of questions, you know? So,
yeah. I mean, one thing that I guess, if I may, one thing that I'm really proud of right now that I think would be a legacy piece for me is that documentary, right? And so it's like, if you want to look at it, it's superfiskyfilm.com. So super fisky, FISKY film.com, not frisky, superfiskyfilm.com. And it's like, right now it's the closest, like, it's the closest thing that I've been able to contribute that is my whole life's experience work, right? Like making a movie, telling a story, advocating, like advocating for somebody and telling their story of somebody who's doing something really wonderful for the environment and for the world. And like me being a producer and able to make that come to fruition is, I think, something really special. So I guess now that I'm thinking about it, to answer your question, the right now thing would be like to be recognized for like a creative endeavor like superfiskyfilm.com. And then later on, hopefully, as like he was a good guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Well, I think something too, like throughout this whole thing though, that like,
you have any takeaways from this, Julie?
I might have one. Well, maybe I have two. I don't know. We'll see where it takes me.
I was going to say, I hope after an hour and a half, she's got more than one.
Oh my gosh. All right. Whatever. So basically though, I think it's just kind of cool to sit and look at like, you know, two very different people, but both situations where things just naturally come full circle for you guys. Like, you know, Michael, you had a job for 10 years that you're like, okay, this is great. And then you just had that one moment that was like, oh wait, no, landscape architecture, that's what I want to do. And then it just fell into place. And same thing with you, you know, wanting to be a meteorologist and now you're doing this, you know, automation and business, it's completely different, but it just aligned for you guys. And like, I don't know, even just looking at how it's all meant to be and, you know, you guys possibly having like a business connection and doing that all because of this platform. Like, it's kind of crazy just how everything works out, you know, that it just falls into place without you even realizing it.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like things have happened over decades for me. You know, it's like one decade I wanted to be a meteorologist. That's when I was going to school. The next decade I was going to be an electrician. Then realized that wasn't the right spot. Knew I was going to be a business owner through that whole thing. And now I just constantly keep evolving. And it sounds like that's the same thing with you. You know, it's like your artistic passion evolved you into landscape architecture. I've heard some of your stuff about environmental change. You know, if people look you up, they'll see you have that open letter that's like, 6 or 7 minutes long that I thought was really interesting to listen to. But just another thing that we're aligned in that we would not even know if we, you know, we're doing robotic lawnmowers for environment. You're speaking to landscape architects about the time is now for us to own being more environmental, you know, or making change ourselves and not politicizing it, which is a platform that I like to stand on. Also, I get sometimes frustrated with people that they try to argue whether or not it's real or not. I'm like, listen, let's start arguing. There's no argument. If less carbon is better, less pollution is better, less noise pollution is better, there is no argument. You know, there's nothing bad about less, right? So
100%.
Yeah. 100%. And like something else too that I picked up on. Here's two for you.
All right.
You guys are both very similar in the mentality of, you see something that, or like you're looking and you're like, okay, this doesn't exist. Let's just make it happen. It was kind of cool to me because he said that, I think,
About
twice. Well, about the podcast, about the, what is it, combat yoga. It doesn't exist. Let's do it. But it's kind of cool because I feel like that's exactly how you are. Like, does this exist? If not, let's do it. You know, like just with everything, I feel like you have a new idea every day. You're like, hey, does this exist? If not, go.
Well, who's looking at the combat yoga then?
Hey, before you reach this episode, let's go ahead and trademark that real quick.
All right, who's the three of mine or yours?
Oh man, I think I do a lot of public speaking, and I do a lot of interviews, both being interviewed and both interviewing people. And I can't tell you how excited I was to talk with you guys because I love your guys' energy. I love that you guys bust each other's balls all day. I like that, like your chemistry. I love that. Like, I love that, Julia. I love that you're 20, and like when I interviewed you guys for my podcast, how mature you are and your perspective. I think, like, Joe, you're just doing a bang up job as a dad, and like it's just so cool to see and fun. And another thing that I like is that I like that you're a visionary, you know, and that you're making it happen and you're not waiting for anybody else. And that's another reason why I like these types of connections, because I think we talked about it before. It's like, I'm not waiting around. I'm not selling people anymore ideas. I'm done with that. I've like almost like destroyed myself trying to bring people along and pull them in and say, hey, like, let's come here. Let's check this out. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to find that people, either one, like, I'll say something and they'll get it. And they'll be like, I get it. Let's move on. Or people like you that are already doing it. You know, like, hey, you're already in motion, already seeing the big picture, already looking 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. That's who I want to line up with. You know, like, I'm not wasting my time.
Yeah, so another thing we're completely in line with, I couldn't agree more with what you just said at the end, where, you know, I feel like I've wasted almost a decade of my life trying to pull people along.
Yeah.
That I'm doing it because it's this fear of, it's the fear of when I become successful, not wanting to leave them behind and not have them be successful with me. But then you start to realize very quickly that that's probably what's keeping me from achieving success.
Yeah.
Is the constant, like, questioning of why they don't get it. And it's what you realize is you're never going to get it. It's one of the things that I say to her, like, sometimes you just have to realize you're, you know, 1 or 5% of the population, that you see things from a different angle, and you'll waste too much time convincing people of your vision. You know,
it's more freeing, is it, that once you like discover that, right? And then now, like, okay, like, you could be a visionary and you could be trying to tow 30 people barely get it, or you could align yourself with 30 other people like me. How much faster do you think you're going to get me where I want to go faster, and I'm going to get you to where you want to go faster? And then we have 29 other people, all, you know. And if, like, tell me a successful entrepreneur that's a hater. You can't find one. Yeah. Because they get it, right? They understand what you're doing, and like, they understand the struggles. I find that entrepreneurs are some of the most helpful people and engaging, and like, can take your ideas and manifest them so much faster than somebody who you have to sell them, right?
Yeah. Well, it's something, you know, going down that road of, you made me think of it when you said, you know, you have to drag 20 people across the line. And, you know, on all social media platforms, it never fails. It's about once a month you'll see, you know, a meme of, you know, boss with, you know, they're pointing the finger and they're behind all the people getting shit on. And then you'll see a leader and they've got like a a toe strap and they're pulling 20 people. And it's interesting to me because I look at both of those and I think they're both horrible visual representations.
I agree.
Because we now seem to live in a society where we classify a good leader as that person that's pulling the 20 people behind him. And we know we don't want the bosses anymore that are standing there letting the birds shit all over the people and they're sheltered by the shit. And I think to myself, what it really should show is kind of like almost like a relay race where, you know, you kind of like you hand the baton to somebody else. You know, you sprint a certain distance and then you hand it off to somebody else and then they sprint a certain distance. And that just continuously happens. And the difference is in my vision is I might get handed the baton again, okay? And I'm going to sprint a little farther distance. I'm going to hand it back off. To me, that is my vision of a great team.
Yeah.
A great team of people. They have one race they want to win, but no one is ever standing idle. They're always waiting for that moment where somebody hands off a baton. That to me would be the most accurate depiction of a true a winning organization.
Yeah. I love sports analogies. So can I expand upon that? It's funny because when my wife and I, when we were doing couples therapy, like every time I had to understand like what we were talking about, it had to be framed in a sports analogy, right? I'm like, okay, so what you're saying, and then like our therapist had to then translate that to my wife. Be like, this is what he's trying to say. But if I was to do a sports analogy of what we were talking about in regards to leadership, I think the leadership is the water boy, like, or the water person at the table, and your team is out there working, and you run up and like give them a cup of water, and you give them support, and like, hey, are you good? Oh, thank you. Okay, and you're watching everybody, just giving water to everybody, and like making sure that they're never thirsty, and they have the tools that they need. And of course, there's some coaching in that as well, right? Like, you're not just the provider, but you're also then like moving people's positions and all this stuff like that. But, like, I think when you're in that support role is the best. And I think that's where I also lack to trying to strive for it. But as long as I keep that in mind, keep aiming for it. Okay.
Yeah, well, and I think you bring up a good point because sometimes, you know, it depends on the day. Some days, talking about sports analogies, I'll tell my general manager or my sales manager, or even I'll have team meetings and I'll say to people like, hey, who am I? Because I always like to relate to football. So I'm like, hey, who am I in the Bears organization? And I can't tell you how many people would go, what did you just say? Oh, yeah. Well, but here's the thing. A lot of times after people they'll say, well, you know, right now it's Nagy, you know, but they'll be like, coach. And I'm like, no, I'm McCaskey. I'm sitting up in the booth, you know. Some days I will say that, but I do fall into my own trap, even in my relay race analogy, where I still think I'm a good enough athlete to grab that baton and run with it, you know? So I do think it is one of the entrepreneur's dilemmas to know when the time is right to just get out of the daily grind. Yeah. To say like, I'm just going to be the water boy or whatever, you know?
Yeah. With that being said, you know, I it's been a while for all of us. I know we probably have to wrap up, but I do want to say that, you know, we talk about being good leaders and being a support team and the relay and the water and all these like analogies and stuff. But at the same time, sometimes you have to be the hammer, right? And and that's, and I think sometimes you have to be like, all right, everybody, like cut your shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's something that I don't think that we talk enough about as leaders because we get kind of embarrassed about it, and there's a whole like connotation that that's like bad leadership, you know. But sometimes, you know, like if you're being taken advantage of, right, as a leader or as a boss or somebody who cares, and that starts compiling, and then you're being taken advantage of, you also have to know when to be the hammer and be like, all right, stop. Like, we're going to regroup. enough shit. Like this is like, you guys need to realize what's going on, what I've given. It's going too far, and we need to reset.
Yeah.
And that's important too, but that's hard, right?
Well, it is. Well, and I mean, the best, this will be a good spot to end it after I say this. It's like, what I found is any employee that I've ever had that feels as if they were being micromanaged, I likely should have let them go months prior. Okay. What I would say is most employees, if they're feeling micromanaged or overmanaged or whatever the case, it's likely because they have a boss or a leader that believes they believe enough in that person they can still coach them to be better, but they're just not realizing it. So they put up a shell of saying, I don't want to work for this person micromanaging me, but they're not realizing most managers, when they think about it from a job perspective, whether you're an entrepreneur or you get paid to be a middle manager, this would be the equation of if you were somebody that got paid to dig a ditch. If the ditch dug itself, you would get paid to do nothing. So if you're paid to manage and you're always managing someone, this is the equivalent of digging the ditch. If I have to manage you, it means you're not doing your job. And I that's another thing that's never talked about, because I hear all these things talking about how people should not be micromanagers, but no one ever talks about the inverse of saying, why are there micromanagers? It's because there's a lot of people that are unwilling to do the work, and the people that get shit on are the middle managers. So anyways, whole nother thing to talk about one day.
Yeah. You guys are amazing. Like, I'm really happy. Thank you for having me. Sorry I babbled for so long.
Oh, that's okay. We're fellow dabblers.